I thought my wife was decorating our house for a special date night because she kept talking about making memories. Instead, she threw a goodbye forever party with balloons that said single and thriving. This is one of those things you read about and think no way could something like this actually happen, but it did to me. My life basically turned into an episode of a reality TV show I never signed up for, and honestly, I still feel like I'm living in the aftermath of a fever dream. Let me set the scene for you. My name's Derek, and I'm a 39-year-old middle school history teacher living in Indianapolis, Indiana. I've been married to Mallory for 10 years. Well, was married. Mallory and I met through mutual friends at a college football game, and from the start, she was the kind of person who could light up a room. She was bubbly, always smiling, and had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world. Over the years, I thought we had a good marriage. Nothing perfect. Sure, we had our arguments, mostly about her spontaneous tendencies versus my more laid-back nature, but I always assumed we were happy, comfortable, safe. And maybe that was the problem. A few months ago, Mallory started acting a little different. At first, it was subtle. She was on her phone more, laughing at texts, and then quickly locking the screen when I walked by. She started going to girls' nights more frequently, which was fine. She's always had a big circle of friends. But then she started throwing around phrases like I need to focus on myself more, and it's time to start living intentionally. Now, I'm not the type to jump to conclusions. I figured it was just one of those phases where people reevaluate things and try to make improvements. She was watching a lot of motivational YouTube videos and reading self-help books about unlocking potential and embracing new opportunities. Honestly, I thought it was kind of cute. She seemed excited about something, so I supported her. But then came the weird part. One evening, I came home from work and found Mallory sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by craft supplies. She had balloons, streamers, glitter, glue, and what looked like about 50 mini bottles of champagne. I stared at the mess for a second before asking what's all this for. She glanced up at me, smiled, and said, "Oh, just getting ready for something fun. You'll see soon enough." I raised an eyebrow. "Is this for us?" Her smile faltered just for a second, but then she quickly recovered. "Of course, you'll love it. Trust me, that should have been my first clue, but I didn't push." Mallory was the type to love surprises, and honestly, I assumed she was planning something romantic for our anniversary, or maybe a belated birthday thing. The next day, she told me she needed me out of the house for most of the weekend. "I need time to set everything up," she said, "and you're not allowed to peek. No exceptions." I thought it was a little strange, but I went along with it. "Anything you need me to do to help?" I asked. "Nope," she said a little too quickly. "Just show up at 7 p.m. on Saturday. That's all I need from you." I shrugged and figured, hey, maybe she's planning something special. Who doesn't love a little effort in a relationship, right? But over the next couple of days, things got even weirder. On Thursday, I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't hear me come in, so I caught bits and pieces of her conversation. "Yeah, it's finally happening," she was saying. "I can't believe I waited this long." I cleared my throat to let her know I was there, and she jumped like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "Just Sarah," she said casually. Sarah was one of her closest friends, so I didn't think much of it. "We're just planning a little surprise. Don't worry about it." Again, I let it go. In hindsight, I was an idiot. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was genuinely curious about what Mallory had planned. She was running around the house all morning, cleaning, decorating, and barking orders at me to stay out of the way. When I left the house around noon, she gave me a big hug and said, "You're going to love this, Derek. Trust me, it's going to be unforgettable." Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. Her tone was light, but her eyes, they looked almost sad. I brushed it off, chalking it up to nerves. I spent the day running errands, grabbing lunch, and trying to kill time. Around 6:30 p.m., I stopped by a florist and picked up a bouquet of roses. I figured if she was going all out to plan something special for us, the least I could do was show up with flowers. When I pulled into the driveway at exactly 7 p.m., the first thing I noticed was the music. It was loud, bass-heavy, and definitely not the kind of playlist Mallory would choose for a romantic date night. I could hear it thumping from inside the house, and I hesitated for a second, wondering if I was at the right address. Then I saw the decorations on the front porch. The railings were wrapped in pink and gold streamers, and balloons floated above the door. But these weren't ordinary balloons. They said things like freedom, new beginnings, and the one that hit me like a punch to the gut, single and thriving. I froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This wasn't a romantic surprise. This wasn't for us. I opened the door and stepped inside, and that's when the full horror of the situation hit me. The house was packed with people, her friends, coworkers, even the neighbor from 2 doors down who I'd barely spoken to. There were trays of food, bottles of champagne, and a giant banner hanging over the fireplace that said goodbye forever, Mallory. Mallory stood in the center of the living room, holding a glass of champagne and wearing a sparkly dress I didn't recognize. She looked like she was on top of the world. Behind her, someone had set up a photo booth with props like feather boas and signs that said "Hot Girl Era," and living my best life. The music cut off the second I walked in, and everyone turned to look at me. The room went dead silent, except for the sound of someone awkwardly setting their drink down on a table. Mallory's face lit up in a way that made my stomach churn. "Derek," she said, walking toward me with that same fake smile she'd been wearing all week. "You're just in time." I stood frozen in the doorway, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was like stepping into a parallel universe where I was the only one who didn't know the rules. Mallory's big surprise wasn't for me. It wasn't for us. This was a goodbye party, and I was the uninvited guest crashing the celebration. "What is this?" I finally managed to ask. My voice came out shaky, and I hated how small I sounded in that moment. Mallory laughed like I just told the funniest joke in the world. "It's my goodbye forever party," she said, gesturing around the room. "You like it?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Goodbye what? What are you talking about?" Her smile faltered for a second, but then she downed the rest of her champagne like it was liquid courage and said, "Derek, I've been trying to find the right way to tell you this. I'm leaving. For good. I need to start over, focus on myself, and well, this is my way of making it official." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You're leaving me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The room was still deathly quiet, but a few of her friends exchanged awkward glances. Someone coughed. "Derek," Mallory said, her tone softening as if that would make this any better. "This isn't about you. It's about me. I've been feeling stuck for a long time, and I can't do this anymore." "This," I repeated. "You mean our marriage? The last 10 years of our lives?" She sighed like I was being difficult. "Yes, Derek, our marriage. It's not working for me anymore." At this point, something inside me snapped. "And this is how you tell me," I said, my voice rising. "By throwing a party with our friends and neighbors and balloons?" I pointed at the ridiculous decorations around the room. "You couldn't just sit me down and talk to me like an adult?" Mallory's smile disappeared entirely. She looked irritated now, like I was ruining her big moment. "I tried to talk to you, Derek. I've been dropping hints for months, but you never noticed. You were always too busy with your little routines, your teaching job, Are you serious right now?" I interrupted. "You think this is my fault because I work and keep the lights on? Don't make this a scene," she hissed under her breath, glancing around at the crowd. "A scene?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You threw a party to announce you're leaving me, and I'm the one making a scene?" Before Mallory could respond, someone from the crowd decided it was the perfect time to chime in. "Mallory," a man's voice called out. "Maybe this isn't the right time." I turned toward the voice and saw him, a tall guy in his early 40s. Wearing a button-down shirt that was unbuttoned just enough to show he thought he was cooler than he actually was. He had a drink in one hand and a smug grin that made my blood boil. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. He didn't flinch. If anything, his grin widened. "I'm Scott," he said casually, like we were old pals. "Mallory's friend." "Friend," I repeated. "Right. Let me guess. You've been helping her focus on herself, huh?" Mallory stepped between us, holding up her hands. "Derek, don't do this," she said firmly. "Scott has nothing to do with this." "Really?" I snapped. "Then why is he here, acting like he knows more about my marriage than I do?" Scott shrugged and took a sip of his drink. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Mallory's a great person, and she deserves to be happy." That did it. I lunged toward him, but someone grabbed my arm before I could get close. "Derek, stop!" Mallory yelled, panic flashing across her face. I turned to see who had stopped me. It was one of Mallory's friends, someone I barely recognized from the handful of barbecues we hosted over the years. "You don't want to do this," she said quietly. "Why not?" I shot back. "Seems like everyone else here is fine with this circus. Why shouldn't I?" At this point, the tension in the room was unbearable. No one was even pretending to enjoy themselves anymore. Mallory looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. "You owe me an explanation," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "And not the one you've been feeding me about focusing on yourself. What's really going on here, Mallory?" She hesitated, glancing around the room like she was looking for an escape route. "Derek, can we please talk about this privately?" "No," I said firmly. "You made this public the second you invited half the neighborhood to watch you humiliate me. So let's hear it. What's the real reason you're leaving?" For a moment, she didn't say anything. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then, finally, she took a deep breath and said, "I've been unhappy for a long time, Derek, and I met someone who made me realize I deserve more." My stomach dropped. "You're cheating on me." "It's not like that," she said quickly. "Really? Then what's it like?" She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, running a hand through my hair. "So all this talk about personal growth and new beginnings was just your way of covering up an affair?" "It's not an affair," she said defensively. "Scott and I didn't do anything until I decided I was leaving." "Oh, well that makes it so much better," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. At this point, the crowd started shifting uncomfortably. Some people were whispering to each other, and a few had already slipped out the door, clearly not wanting to be part of whatever this was turning into. One of Mallory's closer friends stepped forward, looking guilty. "Mallory, maybe this wasn't the best idea," she said softly. "You think?" I shot back. "Derek, I'm sorry," Mallory's friend said, turning to me. "I didn't know she was going to do it like this. If I had, I never would have come." "Great. Glad to know you draw the line at public humiliation, but not infidelity," I said bitterly. Mallory stood there, staring at me with her mouth slightly open, like she was trying to come up with something to say that would make this better. But nothing could fix this. Not the balloons, not the champagne, and definitely not the smug guy standing in the corner sipping his drink. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of her betrayal hit me hard. 10 years of marriage. And this is how it ended, with her throwing a party to announce my replacement. I glanced around the room, locking eyes with a few of her so-called friends who quickly looked away. These were people I'd grilled burgers for at cookouts, helped move furniture, even loaned tools to. And now they were standing here, watching my life fall apart like it was free entertainment. I wasn't about to let Mallory or anyone else walk away from this unscathed. I turned to Mallory, my voice calm but cold. You know what? You can have this party. You can have your new beginning. But you better believe you're not walking away from this without consequences. Her confident smile wavered. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see, I said simply. Then I turned and walked out of the house. As I got into my car, the anger boiled over again. I couldn't just let her win. She had blindsided me, humiliated me, and then tried to frame it as some empowering moment for herself. If she wanted to play dirty, I could too. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I explained everything, how Mallory had been acting, the party, and her confession about Scott. My lawyer, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Rachel, immediately started laying out options. Indiana is a no-fault divorce state, she said, but if she's been using marital assets to fund this affair, that's a different story. Bingo. That was the angle I needed. I spent the next few days gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts. It all painted a clear picture. Mallory had been spending our money to fund her new beginning. Dinners, trips, even a gym membership she'd claimed was for stress relief, but was actually where she met Scott. But that wasn't all. I also found messages she'd accidentally backed up to our shared cloud account, texts between her and Scott, planning their future together while she pretended to still be invested in our marriage. The messages were enough to make my blood boil, but they were also the leverage I needed. I wasn't done. While Rachel worked on the legal side, I decided to make Mallory's new beginning a little less perfect. First, I canceled all the joint credit cards. Then I took my name off the utility bills. If she wanted independence, she could pay for it herself. I also froze the bank accounts, leaving just enough in our joint account for basic expenses. Then came the house. Luckily, I had bought it before we got married, so my name was the only one on the deed. Mallory had been so caught up in her party planning that she hadn't thought about where she'd live after our divorce. On the following Monday, I served her with an official eviction notice. The best part, though, I didn't stop at the legal stuff. I wanted Mallory to feel the same public humiliation she put me through. I waited a week, long enough for the gossip from her goodbye forever party to die down. Then I posted a long, detailed account of everything on Facebook. I included screenshots of the texts, photos of the receipts, and even a picture of the balloons from her party. I kept the tone straightforward and factual, but I made sure everyone knew exactly what had happened. I tagged her, Scott, and even a few of her friends who'd been at the party. It didn't take long for the post to go viral among our social circle. People who'd been at the party started commenting, claiming they had no idea what was really going on. Others messaged me privately, apologizing for not saying anything sooner. Mallory, on the other hand, went radio silent. She didn't post anything, didn't respond to messages, and stopped showing up to her usual hangouts. Scott wasn't much better. His social media accounts suddenly disappeared, and he stopped showing up at the gym where they'd met. A month later, we were sitting in a courtroom. Mallory looked tired, her once perfect confidence replaced with visible anxiety. She had tried to negotiate, but Rachel wasn't having any of it. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Mallory had to pay me back for the marital assets she'd misused, and I was awarded full ownership of the house. She walked away with little more than her clothes and whatever dignity she had left. As for Scott, I heard through the grapevine that his wife, yes, he was married too, had kicked him out as soon as she found out about the affair. Apparently, he'd been juggling 2 lives, and it had all come crashing down. Now, 6 months later, I'm doing better than ever. I've redecorated the house, started going to the gym, a real one, not the kind where people meet Scott, and even adopted a dog. I've also started dating again, slowly, but on my terms this time. Mallory, on the other hand, moved to a tiny apartment on the other side of town. Last I heard, she was trying to reinvent herself again, but the people who used to call her a friend have all distanced themselves. Turns out, no one likes being caught in the middle of someone else's drama. I don't regret what I did. She wanted a fresh start, and I gave her one, but not before making sure she learned that actions have consequences. And now, I'm thriving.